Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. You are now in Quarantine Cuisine. This is a very unique cooking show displaying what you could make from the very little you have in your kitchen. Since we're in the middle of a quarantine, no one can go anywhere, shopping is very difficult. We're trying to make the best of a bad situation here in the Jazz Kitchen. I'm the SAC chef, Damianj, and today we have found the following ingredients in our cupboards, which are almost bare. We have found cornmeal, we have found evaporated milk, we have egg whites, and we have mozzarella cheese. So I said, let's make some cornbread. Let's get to it. First thing we're gonna do is grab some parchment paper, if you have. Because when you're baking, this is one of the best things you can have for baking. This little paper here is expensive, but it really does help a lot. Now before you apply the parchment paper, this is one of my many secrets, that's why you sign up for the Quarantine Cuisine, is you roll it up. Why do you do this? It works better for some reason when you actually do this and it doesn't stand up. For example, if you're trying to bend it somewhere, you'll see that it's not very malleable unless if you do that. Next, you need to apply the spray. This is for the maximum comfort in taking off your baked goods. So a little spray, this is olive oil because it's better for you. Quick spray, not a big thing. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna actually make little pieces that will fit perfectly inside of our squares, rectangles. And that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do those right now for you. So after you've done that, you'll see we have these nice little white things laying at the bottom of these rectangles. That's our parchment paper. And that will secure the fact that when we do have our little breads, whatever it is that we're gonna come up with, they will come out easily, because that's the biggest problem when you bake. And the sides too. I like to get the sides, because the sides, and so as you can see, the spray went everywhere. So what I will do is grab a little brush. I will actually take that and actually brush the sides. Take that, brush the sides. We want to make sure this is not troublesome for you, as easy as possible. Here in Quarantine Cuisine, we know your time is valuable, as is ours. So we're trying to do this as quickly as possible for everybody. So you don't want to spend half an hour trying to get out these little breads when they're done. All right, good. Set that aside. Next step is the oven. Your heat is very important. We're gonna start at 350, but we're gonna go down from there. This is what I call my low and slow baking for breads. Something that I've come up with through trial and error. You gotta make a lot of bad breads to get good breads. You start out at a very medium high temperature, 350. And then about 10, 15 minutes after you see them to actually rise and form, the high temperatures for the rising. Then we want it to solidify, and not solidify too dry, but we bring down the temperature just a bit to 325 and 300, all the way down to 250 if it's big enough. This will probably be done. As long as the toothpick goes through there and it's all nice and dry, you're good to go. So that's why we start at 350, preheating. Our baking pan is ready to go. Now, the next step is you're wet and you're dry. Whenever you're baking breads, muffins, cakes, you have two basic pans of pots or bowls that you're gonna get together, and they're gonna be your wet and your dry. So for the dry today, all we have left, look what I found, cornmeal. That's what we're gonna use. We're gonna start out with 2 cups of cornmeal. We might add more later. This is all about the consistency of your batter, which is what you're gonna pour into these wonderful little things. But we're gonna start out with 2 cups. I use this thing. I used to measure, but now I use this thing. And we're gonna pour in 2 cups into our bowl over here. Yep, there you go. You got 2 cups in there. Now the next step in the dry process is going to be what makes it rise. And for those of you that do know or do not know, baking powder is what makes things rise. that and our yeast. So we're gonna take the exact amount of teaspoons that we did of cups. So if you do 2 cups, a good rule of thumb is going to be 2 teaspoons. Bam. Just washed. And so we're gonna take 2 teaspoons of this baking powder, put it in there like so. Now, at that point, you're gonna wanna swirl it up a little bit. Make sure it's all evenly mixed. Very good. Now we have a little bit of flour left, I think. We're gonna go ahead, and this is how I measure things right now when you're scarce like this. But a little bit of flour will help with the binding, which is why you always wanna have some flour apart from the corn flour, which is what you saw us put in there. So we're just gonna basically just pour some on top, not much really, to where it covers the actual exterior of our cornmeal. And that's all we can afford right now. But it'll be good enough, we'll do a good binding. We're gonna mix that up. Now, the next part is the salt. You wanna use salt always, because salt helps in the proofing. That is in the rising, is what assists the baking powder. So we're gonna do the same thing. This is pink salt, the only salt we use. So we're just gonna crack some pink salt on top of there. Now, the next step is gonna be for you to decide, is this gonna be a sweet or is this gonna be a savory kind of bread that you're gonna use? If you're gonna do a sweet, then you're gonna add some sugar, which we are. But we're also gonna add a little savory to it. So it's gonna make a sweet and savory. And how can you tell the difference? Because when you're all done with this, yes, we are gonna taste it, believe it or not. You're just gonna have a little taste just to make sure all the flavors are balanced. But right now, we're gonna add a little bit of sugar. Once again, we're gonna use our sprinkling technique. It's not much sugar. You'd probably pour a lot more if you wanted to make a sweet cornbread. But we're just gonna do this. This gets you away from the measuring. You're not measuring all the time, wasting your time doing that. Now, we're gonna go ahead and give that a good swirl. Almost ready. Now, the next part is, I told you we're gonna have a little bit of savory, in which place we're going to put in a little bit of onion powder. Gives you that oniony flavor, but there's no onions in it. We ain't got any. And then we're gonna have some Italian seasoning. This is great. People love Italian seasoning, those fresh herb flavors. So good. And then a little bit of the red peppers. This is all the different types of peppers mixed in. It's a 5-pepper blend. And what I do is that I take it and I just lightly sprinkle some in there so where it's not too much, not too little. Yeah. Make sure, because a lot of these things clump up, especially if they're organic, they don't have any preservatives. Make sure you want to just kind of spread them out. Make sure they're not clumped up in the batter. And then mix all that up. Good to go. Crack some pepper on top of that lastly. Cracked black pepper. It's great for blood pressure. It's also an antioxidant, antiviral. Try to keep all the nutrition in mind when I make anything. It's good for everybody. And that is our dry mix. Nothing else should go in that dry mix. Nothing else will help you in this dry mix. If anybody's thinking about baking soda, that would be to make it a lot more tender and less chewy. But we're not gonna have that problem. We're gonna set aside our dry. Now we're gonna go to our wet. So most cornbreads, or any type of bread, uses eggs. We don't have eggs. But, look what I found. Egg whites. So it's not the ideal thing, but it will help if you put in some egg whites. So 2 tablespoons of this, unfortunately I have to measure at this point, will equal 1 egg. So we're gonna do about 4 eggs, which will be 8 tablespoons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, we're gonna fluff that up. Now the magic of these things, these egg whites, is that they fluff up so nice. Just whisk it on up. Whisk, 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 whisk. Been whisking this for about 5 minutes. Take a pause on the camera. And this is what we come up with right here. Now, usually we would add this at the end to hold that fold. In other words, give the actual bread texture. In this case, we're not gonna worry too much about that. We're gonna try our best. But we're gonna add our milk product, which we don't have real milk, we have evaporated milk, which is actually a really good product if you think about it. Evaporated milk actually takes all the best parts of milk and saves it. That's by reducing regular milk. So it's actually a really good thing. The only bad thing would be the preservatives, which at this point, we do what we can. So we're gonna add 1 cup of the milk to our eggs, like so. And we're gonna whisk, 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 whisk away. Very nice. Now at this point, since we have egg whites, not real eggs, I'm worried about the binding. That means that it's gonna hold together. So one of the things I'm gonna add to this, which is my own creation, is gonna be some mozzarella cheese. Cheese is a great thing because it just kind of holds everything together. And we just happen to have some right here. Look at what I found. We're gonna put in there about 1/2 cup of cheese. This is 1/4. This is 1/2. That's it, man. You know, just a little bit of cheese in there. It'll all melt. Mozzarella's great. This mozzarella has some Italian herbs that I put in it beforehand to give it some more flavor. And it'll be great for our savory bread. So you whisk all that in there, and you'll notice that it all just starts to kind of bind together. It's great. Excellent. Okay, now comes the hard part. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we mix the wet with the dry. So you have 2 options. You can pour the dry into the wet, or you can pour the wet into the dry. In this case, I particularly like to pour the dry into the wet because of the fact that it is a lot more delicate of a recipe since we don't have a lot of the ingredients we need. The last thing will be some butter, which we're gonna add in a minute. That's the actual fat content that we need. So we're basically pouring this over here. It actually takes care of sifting since we didn't get to sift this corn. But you know, corn is hard to sift anyways. But this whole entire mixture is getting blended in here. So far, so good. And ladies and gentlemen, we have mixed in all that cornmeal dry mix. And we have this kind of soupy but lumpy. Now to that we're gonna add 3 tablespoons of butter, which I was thankful to have. And it's partially melted, not all the way, so we can get, you know, some good consistency in this. We're gonna pour that all over our batter. Every last drop. And we're gonna keep on mixing in there, not too much, but just to where it's all incorporated. Now here comes the test of time. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna give it a little flavor, taste. Seems it needs a little bit more salt. Very flavorless. But a lot of the other flavors are coming through. So what I would do at this point is I'm gonna add a little bit more of our evaporated milk. See how much that is. This is 1/4. This is where the experimentation comes in, just so we can get a good loaf, you know. And it's all about the consistency of the batter, is what I've learned. So that's 1/4. Yeah, it's pretty good. So 2 1/4 is what we ended up with. We had 2 cups of cornmeal, and we had 2 1/4 of evaporated milk as our main wet ingredient. And there is no recipe here. This is just what I have on hand. During quarantine, it's hard to go out and get groceries. So I'm just trying to make the best of what we have, make sure everybody's well fed, and you guys gotta keep that in mind. Some recipes will be great, some won't be as great, but at least you're gonna learn how to bake to where it's edible and not as bad for you as going out and getting takeout every day, which is the trend. So we're gonna go ahead now's the difficult part. We're gonna pour these into our pan, and we'll show you that in a minute. So we're about to pour this in there, and I just see it as way too dry. So I'm actually gonna pour the rest of the milk. Oven's ready. So once again, our milk, here's another quarter. So basically it was a whole can of milk. I just saved it just in case there would be some leftover. Really, we did a whole can of milk, which is easier. Now we're gonna mix this up right before we pour it in the batter. Yeah, you don't want it to be too dry because then you're gonna get really dry cornbread. The cheese, the butter, and the egg whites will hopefully help give it some easier texture. But you're basically gonna take a ladle, and we're gonna go in there as soft and easy as possible. There you go, that's about half. You don't wanna go more than half on these. Make sure you're mixing well. There you go. It's about half. Another half. And we'll clean it up in a second. Just want to make sure we get them all kind of even. And then we'll add the last little bit. We're just going ahead and filling it up to about halfway, each one of these guys. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the rubber spatula is indispensable and has cleared out our bowl completely of our batter. Cornmeal is something I'm not too experienced with working with, so we shall see. I think that we got a pretty good consistency. It's where it's flowing, but not too soupy, but not too grainy. And I think that'll be the best possible compromise given our strict limitations here in quarantine. And what I've done is I've taken the spoon and just kind of mellowed everything out to where it looks as even as possible. And we have a pretty good product. And this is what it looks like. Now we're gonna pop it in the oven at 350 for about 20, 25 minutes, you know, around that half-hour mark at the most. You're gonna wanna bring down the temperature. We're about 15 minutes into this, halfway through. And as you can see, we have perfect little cornbreads, or whatever you wanna call them. But yeah, they're cornbreads. They're mainly made out of cornmeal, very little flour, in the oven. And we're gonna check back with you in about 10 more minutes. So ladies and gentlemen, our little alarm went off. We've had these in the oven for 30 minutes at 350 degrees. Now we're gonna take them out. Careful not to burn yourselves, of course, which I would. Look at that. But they're not done quite yet. Because now we do our toothpick test. That's the safest way to know if something is done in any kitchen. And we just go ahead and we push it right in the middle here. Oh no, completely dry. So I guess it just takes 30 minutes. Clear that out. There's no need to do anything else at this point, ladies and gentlemen. These are completely corn. We do not know how the consistency will be, but they are perfectly baked. They smell amazing, very savory, and they smell like they'd be great with like a meatloaf or some brisket, something like that, real hearty. And we're just gonna let these cool now. I like to put it on top of that grate so that the air comes from below, from all the different sides. And we're gonna let it cool there for about 20 minutes, about the time that it was in the oven. And then we're gonna pull them out with our rubber spatula. Ladies and gentlemen, here is our finished product. The Quarantine Cuisine cornbread special. This was made from some cornmeal we had. We're gonna slice right into this. You can tell that they're perfect on the bottom, on the sides. So just a note on temperature. 350 is your B flat temperature. So if it doesn't get done within half an hour with 350, lower it to 325, and then for another 10 minutes, if it's still not done completely all the way through on your toothpick test, then go down to 300. The more you stay in there, the lower your temperature should be so that the bottom doesn't get too burnt. Because remember, the bottom is what burns out the fastest, the top being the secondary. So we're gonna slice into this thing just to show you guys what we got here. It's really, really nice. I'm very happy with this product, and we're gonna recap what we did afterwards. Look at that, perfect texture. Now, the last test, which I wish you all could take part in. Man, that's perfect. So good. So, delicious. To recap, what we ended up doing, this is when our recipe comes in, because when we first start in the quarantine cuisine, we just gather the ingredients we have and make the best of what we have around. Now that we actually found this is a pretty good experiment, we can come up with our own recipe. We use specifically in the Jazz Kitchen today 2 cups of cornmeal, 1 can of evaporated milk, half a cup of mozzarella cheese. We also use 2 teaspoons of baking powder. We use salt, we use flour, we use sugar, we use spices, Italian seasoning, and we used the 5 pepper seasoning that we had there as well, which gives it an amazing little kind of heat to it when it's all done, said and done. We use 350 degrees in the oven. So there's your recipe. Pretty simple, pretty standard. And remember, it's all about the consistency. When you're mixing in all those items, make sure it's not too dry, but not too soupy. A perfect in between, and go only halfway. You saw they filled all the way to the top of these little compartments in our baking tray. So good luck, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you on the other side of the quarantine cuisine.